if you are sophisticated in that understanding in terms of spent time, I start where I got my first lesson. As an undergraduate student in Delhi University, I read a little book by a person called E.H. Carr. Its name was What is History? And one of the things it says, what is a fact? Okay? Now we can come into what is an empirically verifiable fact. But even if you can determine what is an empirically verifiable fact, you still need to provide context and setting. Like I started with that statement you quoted. I said statement had a particular context.
Right.
So Caesar crossed the Rubicon. Clear enough? It's a fact. You can determine the year when Caesar crossed the Rubicon. But that fact in and of itself will not tell you anything. It will not tell you, for instance, how many people crossed the Rubicon before Caesar did and how many crossed the Rubicon after that. If there are 10 million people crossing the Rubicon, hypothetically in a given period of time, and Caesar is somewhere in between, it means nothing. If on the other hand you tell me that the Rubicon is an insurmountable river to cross and Caesar made a heroic crossing like climbing the Everest, then the fact of his crossing assumes a dimension of its own.
Right.
You start from there. Then you go into 18th century German philosopher coming earlier. By the way, E.H. Carr worked for the Foreign and Commonwealth Office. I think he's working on Russia. I think it was a radio signals or somebody, but he wrote a brilliant piece. Now there's Ranke. It says facts speak for themselves. Of course they speak for themselves, but you've got to give something. But that was an objective analysis as part of the empiricist tradition. But now you went from there to narratives. You can create any narrative. So then my worry became, and when I was writing that book, is that if you utter a lie, okay, and whilst truth is busy tying its shoelaces, that lie has traveled halfway around the world. That is what you're seeing today. That if you and I are politically against each other, by against each other means if we, let's say, our narratives are clashing. First of all, why do I need to build a narrative? I'll come to that in part of my work. I think I need to build a narrative because I want to see the impact of the development work I'm doing. And I'll come to that in a minute if you allow me. To reach people, because I'm part of a system which tries to prove that good governance or good economics is good politics. Now you have got something completely opposed to that. I have a lot of friends in the left, I'll tell you, a lot of friends in the left, I'm putting it mildly. Because in my own time, I took the teachings of people like Karl Marx seriously. And my desire to study Marx was partly what political philosophy, but more because I thought historical materialism, which is his analysis of history, has a lot to say for it. For instance, quoting one of these famous statements, I quoted this to a very senior CPIM leader who knew me when we used to play cricket on the lawns of India Gate, 60 years ago? I'm 72, and we must have been playing cricket at maybe 55 years ago, but not more than that, because I entered university at the age of 16, so before we entered university. And said that, and this is Marx talking about Hegel. He said, Hegel once famously wrote, history repeats itself or has a tendency to repeat itself. This is the 18th Brumaire of Louis Napoleon, Marx writing. He said he should have added, first time as tragedy, second time as farce. What we are going through today is a transitioning from that tragedy to the farce. Because a country like India, which has been fed a lot of Fabian socialist stuff, serious socialist stuff, lightweight socialism, strong socialism. I mean, I used to famously have to hear in my earlier career, he said, the communist parties in many countries of the world, certainly the communist parties in Europe had collapsed. Communist parties in America didn't actually take off. But even in the Soviet Union, you saw the total collapse of the Communist Party. I mean, I can give you historical. In China, what you see is not communism. In many ways, it's state, collective, socialism in a sense. But the only place where the Communist parties were thriving in that period when I was having it was India. You had a Congress government in power in the center, led by Dr. Manmohan Singh, in which the Communist parties had you by your, I have to choose my words carefully.
You can use the Spanish word for it.
Yeah, they couldn't move without those guys. Now, I can understand if you are dependent on electoral support on those guys. I can understand that. If you are into democratic politics, then, as Marx said, the electoral process gives the opportunity to the proletariat once in 5 years to determine which members of the ruling class or the bourgeoisie will misrepresent them in parliament. That is broadly their cynicism. But the point is, you had an India which in 1947 gained independence from the colonial dispensation after a period of 190 years. And during that 190 years, you saw your contribution to the global GDP decline from 27% contribution to the global GDP. Not me, this is Angus Maddison, a Cambridge historian. And it came down to what, 2% or so in 1947? Now, between 1947 and 2024, you had a bulk of about 70 years or so, near about, of Congress rule. Garibi hatao, ye karo. Look at what they did. It's one of the biggest political scams which has been pulled anywhere in the world.
I think you mean till 2014. And then
No, that's what I mean. I said no, if you take the period from 1947 to 2024, bulk of the period was Congress Party.
Yeah.
Of course, till 2014. After that, we are there. Now you look at what happened before 2014 and look at what has happened after 2014.
If you can't watch a full podcast, watch a clip instead. You'll be as entertained and as informed. That's my guarantee. That's why you got to subscribe to Dostcast Clips.